Hi there, I'm Adrian Palaio and thank you for tuning in. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at azpalaio21. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, azpalaio21, where I play video games and talk a little bit more about MMA. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in and welcome to MMA Monday.
MMA Monday with Adrian Palaio starts now.
Happy Monday, everybody. I am Adrian Palaio, and welcome to the second edition of MMA Monday. Like I said, I am your host, Adrian Palaio, bringing you the week of MMA action that has unfolded in the past 7 days. And what a 7 days it's been. Lots gone on, not only in the UFC, but we had a Bellator card this past week, as well as a descendant of a mob boss fight for LFA. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But a quick go over last week's UFC card. We had Brian Ortega, a young man from LA who most recently lost in a featherweight title fight to Max Holloway. I say recently, however, that fight was nearly 2 years ago. Lost to Max Holloway in that title fight, 4th round TKO. Did not do as well as maybe he would have hoped. Lost that fight rather tragically. Max Holloway kind of had his way with him. However, able to get a unanimous decision victory over the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung in this week's main events. We also had Jessica Andrade, the former UFC strawweight champion, get a big win over former title challenger in Caitlin Chookagian. She won in the first round via TKO. Got a lot to talk about here in this week's edition of MMA Monday, so let's get straight to it. Going over some of the smaller news from this past week, we had Bellator and Cris Cyborg. You might remember her from the UFC, former featherweight champion. She defended her Bellator featherweight championship against Arlene Blencow this past week, and she submitted her in the second round, rear naked choke, the first submission in Cyborg's career, believe it or not, despite the fact that she, I believe, is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So she retains her featherweight title, and the thing that is confusing is who's next for Cyborg in Bellator, or for anywhere for that matter. I mean, she beats Julia Budd. I was there live for that fight where she beat Julia Budd. Was not close. She beats Arlene Blencow, second round submission. Who's really next? I mean, maybe Olga Rubin, Sinead Kavanaugh, those are really the only names that come to mind in Bellator. Julia Budd's coming off a win, but we just saw her get dominated by Cyborg. And that's going to be the problem when it comes to, Cyborg being in Bellator and having to defend this title. There's not really much going for her as far as the division in Bellator. And it's sad to say, but that's just a matter of fact. That's the truth. We can see her fight someone like Leslie Smith, a veteran formerly in the UFC. We can see her fight Julia Budd, but there's only so many times that we're going to be able to watch that. Cyborg is a very marketable fighter. We love watching her fight, but the thing is, she's in Bellator, a place where she's not getting all the eyes on her. You know what I mean? She's able to make some good money, win some fights, defend her championship. That's great. But you're not getting all the eyes on you. You're not going to get the recognition that you deserve. And it's because she's not in the UFC. It is what it is. So we'll see what's next for Cyborg as things move on. We had Patricky Pitbull get pulled out due to medical issues for his fight against Jaleel Willis. So he was unable to fight this past week due to the Mohegan Athletic Commission pulling him out of his bout. No word on if he's going to get rebooked with Jaleel Willis in the near future. So the next card for Bellator is actually a pretty big one. Gegard Mousasi taking on Douglas Lima next week actually not next week, in 2 weeks, for the middleweight championship after Rafael Lovato had to vacate the title. If you don't recall, Rafael Lovato had to vacate the title due to really bad neck issues, actually. Very scary for him. He has something going on with his neck. I don't know if it's with his neck or with his something with his spine. He talked about it a little bit on the Joe Rogan podcast, so take a look at that if you haven't done so already. But it is very unfortunate Rafael Lovato had to vacate that title after winning in impressive fashion over Gegard Mousasi. But the title is currently vacated, and we're going to have a new middleweight champion, hopefully, after next week. Gegard Mousasi taking on Douglas Lima in that one. Also, Nick Newell is in action against Zachary Zane. And if you've never heard the name Nick Newell, that's because that young man is a MMA fighter. He has the distinction of only having one arm. He's a former combat veteran who lost his arm in combat, came to back to America, came home, and now he's a mixed martial artist, and he's 16-3, believe it or not. So he's had a really good time in this career, and he's doing very well for himself. He's in Bellator. He's got 3 more fights on his contract. You love to see it, you know, showing the world that you can do it. You can overcome any obstacles, even only having one arm. So he takes on Zachary Zane on the prelims for next week's Bellator card that also features a middleweight title fight. And also, I mentioned it earlier on, we had a descendant of a former mob boss in action.
Forget about it.
CES in Rhode Island, John Gotti III. Yes, you heard that last name right. Gotti, John Gotti III was in action, undefeated up to this point. And I say up to this point because he gets his first loss of his career this past week. Lost via unanimous decision to Nick Alley. So now John Gotti stands at 5-1 in his career, and it's going to be interesting to see how he progresses. You know, a guy like John Gotti, he gets to the UFC, he already has some recognition. That last name is all he needs. You know, you hear about a descendant of a mob boss fighting in the UFC, that's going to turn heads. That's going to get some headlines. People are going to want to tune in to see that fight. How is this mob boss's grandson going to do fighting? You know, like, I kind of want to see that. Not only do you want to see it just to see for the notoriety, but maybe you want to see this guy get his ass kicked. I don't know. But the thing is, people are going to want to see it. So John Gotti, you hope that he progresses a little bit more. You know, you can only get better. Probably good that he got his first loss out of the way now early on in his career. We had another guy lose his first loss, record his first loss of his career, and we'll talk about that later on as well. All right, so that's all for the smaller cards and news. So now we're going to move on to a segment that I like to call A Year Ago Today.
Hey, what happened?
All right, so a year ago today in the UFC, we had UFC Fight Night, Weidman versus Reyes in the Garden in Boston. The light heavyweight debut of one Chris Weidman, the former middleweight champion of the world. And in that main event, Dominic Reyes knocks out Chris Weidman. First round too. Dominic Reyes knocks out Chris Weidman in the main event of that fight night 1 year ago. Recently, Reyes hasn't been having the best of luck, lost to John Jones for the title back in March, in what a lot of people will say is a very controversial decision. A lot of people had it for Reyes, and because of that, they were really gunning for him to get a rematch against John Jones. He didn't get John Jones. He got Jan Blachowicz. He was able to, try to prove it again, try to go after the championship again. He got his chance, and he lost. Jan Blachowicz, your new light heavyweight champion. That's what Dominic Reyes has been up to since that win over Weidman. Reyes sits at number 2 in the light heavyweight division at this point in time. Chris Weidman recently, after that loss to Reyes, took a lot of time off. And he just recently beat Omari Akhmedov about a month ago. He sits at number 9 in the division. He's been calling for Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, it'd be awesome to see that fight, I guess. It'd be really good for Khamzat Chimaev. That's kind of a win-win for him because he loses that fight. He gets to say, oh, I lost to the former middleweight champion. He wins that fight. He just beat the former middleweight champion. and that's number 9 in the division. He shoots right up the rankings. That's a very risky fight for Weidman to take, so I'm not really sure why he's would be going after a fight like that. You probably want to see him fight someone, maybe from the 5 to 10 range. He's number 9 right now, and if you're Chris Weidman, you don't have that much time left, you'd imagine. So you really want to see him fight ranked guys. You don't really want to see him fight guys that aren't ranked. That would almost be wasting his time. However, maybe he just wants to get that win bonus. I am not Chris Weidman, so I really can't be one to tell him what to do with his career. You know what I mean? It is what it is. We all love Chris Weidman, former middleweight champion, surely a legend of the Octagon. You just hope that he's able to figure things out in the near future. Also on that card, we had Yair Rodriguez defeating Jeremy Stephens via unanimous decision. Now, Yair Rodriguez and Stephens, they had a little bit of history because they had a fight in Mexico City that happened that ended because of eye pokes. There was no contest called because of it. Now, Jeremy Stephens got booed out of that Mexico City arena and got shit thrown at him for no reason, essentially. Like, the fight should have been called off. He got poked in the eyes way too many times. They rebooked the fight here for the Garden, and Yair Rodriguez ends up winning this fight via unanimous decision. I can distinctly remember a lot of people really, really going for Stephens because they just straight up don't like Yair. He's kind of a whiner, he's not necessarily the best loser, and certainly not the best winner. You can definitely recall him getting heated he was getting absolutely heated at Michael Bisping in Mexico City when he was getting interviewed about the whole situation, that had just occurred, and he was threatening Michael Bisping a little bit. And I mean, I kind of wanted to see Bisping do something, but Bisping's a professional. He's a broadcaster now, not necessarily a fighter, so he wasn't going to do anything. And the thing is, ever since this win over Jeremy Stephens back in October of 2019, Yair hasn't done anything. He was calling for Zabit. He was calling, for, a championship fight, essentially. He didn't get anything. He was recently supposed to fight Zabit Magomedsharipov, and then he pulls out due to injury. Bruh. He sits at number 5 in the featherweight division currently. Jeremy Stephens, on the other hand, most recently lost to Calvin Kattar at UFC 249. He got a heavy elbow. Boom, right to the dome piece. He sits at number 8, and he is more than likely going to be fighting someone in the bottom totem pole of the rankings. He's got to fight his way back up. But Jeremy Stephens, this guy's been around for such a long time. I don't doubt that he will be back. I think he still has a lot left in him. Also on the card, we had Greg Hardy, former Dallas Cowboy, win over Ben Sassoli. However, it got overturned to a no contest because of an incident immediately after the first round. Greg Hardy goes to his corner. He's talking to his coaches. He signals over to one of his cornermen, and he gets an inhaler, and he uses it in between rounds. Bruh. Now, I don't ever remember this happening before in a fight, but that is most definitely illegal. That is not something that you can do. A bruh moment for sure from from Greg Hardy. Like, you can't do that. And Daniel Cormier immediately called it out. He's like, you can't do that. And you can't. It got overturned to a no contest because of it. Just a crazy scene. And I remember watching it live and being like, what are you doing? You can't do that. If you have asthma, you have to figure that out. You need to work on your cardio or take a shot of the inhaler before the fight. I don't know. It seems like something, and you gotta, like, if you have asthma, that's fine, but that's something you have to understand that you have to work with, with your training. You have to understand that it's going to be a disadvantage to you. You can't just get an inhaler mid-round. You're giving yourself more oxygen. You're essentially resetting your cardio. That should not be allowed. Because of it, he got disqualified. That's a no contest. Other notable winners on that card: Joe Lozon, veteran of the Octagon, getting a big win after about a year and a half of not fighting. Macy Barber, getting a big win on that one over Jillian Robertson. You had Sean Brady getting a win on that one. Brendan Allen, who's, I believe, in action pretty soon. And Tanner Boser also got a win. He wasn't very widely known back then, but now he's a ranked heavyweight here in the UFC. All right, so that was a year ago today. Every week on this podcast, we'll be going over a fight card that was a year old, essentially. So we'll have another fight card rundown for you next week. All right, probably the most fun portion of this is going to be going over any, signings, fight news, rumors, and all of that kind of stuff. First things first, we got Marvin Vittori taking on Yakuray Sosa on December 12th. Omari Akhmedov was supposed to fight against Marvin Vittori. Akhmedov, of course, coming off that loss to Chris Weidman. Akhmedov had to pull out due to injury, so now we have Yakuray Sosa taking on Marvin Vittori. That should be a very interesting fight, and it's a fight that Yakuray, you don't want to see him take this fight, because if he loses, he's dropping down the rankings hard. But this late into his career, you have to wonder if he's kind of accepting the fact that he's more of a gatekeeper, that he's not necessarily going to get a shot at the title. And you gotta love Yakuray Sosa. When he knocked out Chris Weidman, I thought for sure he'd be getting a title shot. He never did. And it sucks, but that's the fight game sometimes. So Yakuray Sosa going at it against Marvin Vittori. And Vittori has been doing very well for himself ever since the Adesanya loss. So good for him. That should be a good fight. Michael Chandler, he got signed by the UFC. Everyone was clamoring for him to fight Islam Makhachev after RDA went down with an injury. So Islam has no opponent, and he's not going to be on the card next week. And everyone was kind of like, why doesn't Michael Chandler want to fight this guy? He's right there in the rankings, right there, like top 10 to top 15 fighter. Boom, that's a good, starting out fight, a good gauge for your skill. And if you're so confident in yourself, Michael Chandler, why don't you want to take this fight? I don't understand it. You are unknown to the UFC fan. Until you have shown your skill to the UFC fan does not know what to expect from you. Ben Askren got Robbie Lawler because he was able to market himself pretty well. Michael Chandler hasn't really done a good job of doing that. And he has to have the disadvantage of coming from a promotion like Bellator, which kind of has a negative stigma behind it. So the average UFC fan is going to say, you're from Bellator, you can't be that good. The UFC can market you all you want, but we know where you're coming from. So Michael Chandler has to take a fight against a guy like Islam Makhachev, a guy like Kevin Lee, hell, even a guy like Cowboy Cerrone. He's expecting to fight Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor right out of the gate. And that's kind of a win-win for him. Like, not necessarily like a lose-lose situation, because he's going to get a lot of notoriety right away, kind of like Ben Askren did fighting Robbie Lawler. But it's just not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. If he ends up fighting Tony Ferguson, I don't even know what'll happen. I feel like Tony Ferguson would wipe the floor with him. But the off chance that Michael Chandler were to win against Tony Ferguson, that would still not be fair. He has not deserved a fight against Tony Ferguson, especially since Tony Ferguson should have been fighting for the title. So I don't understand why Chandler won't take a fight against a guy like Islam Makhachev. I feel like you need to earn your spot in the UFC. Israel Adesanya had 6 fights before he won the actual middleweight title. And Chandler wants to get to the title in like 2 fights. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. If Dana really likes Michael Chandler, he'll probably book him against someone important. That's to be seen. I think a fight with Islam would have been great for Michael Chandler. Maybe Kevin Lee. Someone from that 10 to 15 range. I think that's a good fight for Michael Chandler. If you want to have a main event, a fight card, that's fine. But not against someone like Tony Ferguson. Not against someone in the top 5. That's not it for me. Corey Sanhagen back in the news this week after his big win over Marlon Moraes. He really wants to fight TJ Dillashaw. He wants to quote unquote steal his thunder. I think that'd be a great fight. Corey Sanhagen with a big win over Marlon Moraes. And I think a win over TJ Dillashaw would all but guarantee that he's next in line for the title. I really like that idea. Give him TJ Dillashaw. The only thing I don't want to see is TJ Dillashaw fighting for the title right after serving a 2-year suspension.
Nope.
For doping. Are we not forgetting this guy cheated? And still lost to Henry Cejudo, by the way. And TJ Dillashaw is an amazing fighter, don't get me wrong, but I don't think rewarding him with a title fight coming back from a suspension is the way to go. I think a fight with Corey Sanhagen would be amazing. We had Katlyn Chookagian saying that she might retire soon. And that's very interesting considering the way she lost this weekend. She got dominated. Boom. Big liver shot from Andrade. Ran away from her and then got finished. Retiring might not be the worst idea for Katlyn Chookagian. She had her title fight. Couldn't win it. Got a win over her sister, Antonina Shevchenko. Got back up in the rankings, number 1. Lost to Andrade. It's not looking like a title fight's happening in the near future for Chookagian. She wants to start a family. All power to her. If she wants to retire, that's her business. All the best to Katlyn Chookagian. We have Jack Hermanson and Darren Till official for December 5th. I love this fight. 2 top 10 guys going at it in the middleweight division. We have Joker coming off that win over Kelvin Gastelum. Darren Till's coming off the loss to Robert Whittaker in what was an amazing fight. And this fight, whoever wins this fight is honestly still just 1 win away from a title shot probably. I mean, honestly, Joker might get a title shot off this win alone if Jared Cannonier is able to beat Robert Whittaker. Because of the way the MMA math works, Hermanson would have lost to Cannonier, who would get the next shot. Hermanson would have beaten Till, who lost to Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker lost to Jared Cannonier. I feel like a win over Till might be enough to at least push Hermanson into the top 3, top 2. I believe so, especially considering how good Till has looked. That fight's happening December 5th. Can't wait for that. Can't wait for the fight next week in the middleweight division with Cannonier and Robert Whittaker. I'm a little bit biased considering I've trained at the MMA lab before, but I feel like Jared Cannonier can pull that one off. We got Conor McGregor back in the news, and honestly, I love it. I love it. I need Conor McGregor back in MMA news. We need Conor McGregor back in MMA news.
The king is back!
He's more than likely fighting Dustin Poirier in January of 2021. And that's great for mixed martial arts. He wants to fight Poirier for a pretty weird reason. You know, he wants to fight a southpaw before he gets to fight Manny Pacquiao. Now, Manny Pacquiao and Poirier and Conor, I should say, have been talking about this fight for a long time. And Conor fighting Poirier just because he is a southpaw, I don't think that's it. I think that's kind of something they came up with, you know, kind of just out of coincidence. But it makes sense. It will be a nice warm-up to fight Poirier, who is a southpaw. And Poirier will be a tough fight for Conor, too. I saw some opening betting lines, and they were close. I think Conor was a slight favorite, but I like that fight. I love that fight, and Poirier deserves that fight. Please let us see this fight. Speaking of that fight, Conor wants that fight to be at Cowboys Stadium. Talking to Jerry Jones, apparently Conor's buddy with him. And he wants that fight at Cowboys Stadium. With fans. And Dana White might be down for that. I mean, I can imagine Dana White really wants a crowd for this Conor McGregor fight. And what better way to do it than in a huge stadium where you can space out a lot of people and be able to justify it. Be saying, oh, well, it's socially distanced. Everyone's kind of away from each other. It's a large area, so we're good, but we're able to have a crowd. And I think that'd be great, especially considering it's a Conor McGregor fight. Now, the visual of an empty arena, an empty stadium for a Conor McGregor fight may not be the best, but I can guarantee you that the UFC would rather sell 20,000 seats in a 100,000 seat stadium than have no crowd whatsoever and just have Conor fight, not for free, essentially, but like not able to get a gate out of him. That's the reason they've been holding him back. That's the reason they haven't had him fight yet during this pandemic, is because they're not able to get a live gate out of him. We've seen him pull 11 million, 17 million, a lot of money through these live gates, even more money, not even more money, but they would rather have that money than have to just rely on him getting a lot of pay-per-view buys, because they have to still give him a lot of that pay-per-view, money, because of the pay-per-view points that he's accumulated, and surely because of his contract that he's renegotiated. They want that live gate. So at a place like Cowboy Stadium, that can happen. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be cool. However, there are some detractors to this fight, and not because it wouldn't be a great fight. People are all in agreement on that. People don't want this fight to be at 170 pounds because both of these guys are, basically lightweights. They're both at 155 usually. And if Dustin Poirier, the thing is, Dustin Poirier is this close to getting another title shot. Beating Dan Hooker like that, amazing fight. He beats Conor McGregor, surely he's deserving of another shot at a title. The only thing is, what title? What are we talking about here? If you're fighting at welterweight, should that not be the division you get a shot in, or should you not be ranked in that division? How do you expect to get ranked at lightweight and get a title shot based off of your achievements at lightweight if you're fighting at 170? That's what people are saying, and I agree with that sentiment. But I don't think that Poirier and Conor are going to want to make that cut down to 155. I just don't. I think this fight is going to happen at 170. And that's fine. I want to see the fight. I don't care what weight it's at. But people are having that sentiment. People are saying that about this fight because they don't believe that getting a win at welterweight should give you a title shot at lightweight. Speaking of fans being allowed in the building, Conor wants that fight at Cowboy Stadium, get a crowd in there. Fans are going to be allowed in the building next week for UFC 254, Khabib versus Gaethje. A quick little, law was passed, I guess you could say that, in Dubai to allow fans in the building in limited quantities for UFC 254. I'm not sure if it's for cards moving forward on Fight Island, but certainly for next week. I can tell you this, Dana White is pushing for more this very second. There's no way he's not fighting that and saying we want more fans to be allowed in. He's probably saying, oh, they will all be masked, they'll all be tested. The logistics of that blows my mind, but if they can pull that off, get a bunch of rich, sheiks or, rich Arabs in the building cheering, all of them probably cheering for Khabib, that'd be a pretty crazy sight. However, there was an instance at a Saudi Arabia show that the WWE put on where that exact same thing, they had a bunch of rich sheiks in the front row. None of them were making noise. None of them seemed excited at all. Half of them seemed like they didn't even want to be there. So is this even going to be a good idea? Are these fans even going to be fans, or are they just going to be people who are giving a lot of money to the UFC just to be there for PR stunts and stuff like that? Will it even be worth it? Are you doing this for the integrity of mixed martial arts because you want fans to be in the arena? Or are you just doing this for a quick cash grab? Either way, it'll be nice to see people in the arena, perhaps get a little bit of ambiance, some noise, but that is something to consider. Fight news, we have Jessica Ai fighting JoJo Calderwood January 23rd, which is more than likely going to be the pay-per-view that Conor and Dustin fight on. And Jessica Ai, of course, losing recently to Cynthia Calvillo. JoJo Calderwood had a title shot against Valentina in the bag. Valentina got injured. JoJo said, I need a fight. So she fought. She fought Jennifer Maia, and she lost terribly. So both of these women are in desperate need of a win, and they get to do it January 23rd on pay-per-view, or maybe on the prelims, who knows. UFC's working on Ciryl Gane versus Junior Dos Santos. That'd be a pretty interesting fight to see. Ciryl Gane, his fight this past weekend fell through against Ante Delija due to contract disputes between Delija and PFL, Professional Fighters League. They have weird contracts based on seasons, and because this last season didn't happen, Delija apparently didn't think his contract was valid. PFL's like, nope, your contract's still valid for next season, yada yada. Delija couldn't fight. Because of that, Ciryl Gane is now possibly going to fight Junior Dos Santos, and I think that would be an incredible fight. Gane is ranked in the top 10 in the heavyweight division, so makes sense that he would fight a guy like Dos Santos, who's coming off a loss to Rosenstruik. That'd be a pretty cool fight to see. Curious to see when they book that fight as well, because Junior Dos Santos got knocked out by Rosenstruik, so you don't want to see him come back too soon. Maybe January, maybe on that pay-per-view. You never know. The Conor pay-per-view. Now, could Conor and Dustin be up to something else? Ultimate Fighter, Dana White confirmed, is to begin filming in November. And we have no idea who the two coaches are. At first, a couple months ago, people thought it was going to be Izzy and Costa, Israel Adesanya and Paulo Costa. That turned out not to be the case. Maybe, I think, three pairs that could make sense. Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya. That would make for amazing television because these two guys absolutely despise each other. I think that would make for great television. You have these two guys coach against each other, see them interact with each other inside the fighter house. That would be magic. Another idea, Conor and Dustin. Same thing. Their fight is in January. Have them do this. Keep themselves busy. However, I don't think that would happen because they are probably too busy actually preparing for that fight. And I don't think you want to run the risk of Conor getting COVID, Dustin getting COVID by doing this. With that said, I think the most likely option is going to be Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman. Gilbert Burns is injured. So, I can't remember if it was Gilbert or if it was Kamaru Usman who got injured, but one of them got injured, had to pull out of the fight. That's the reason that Figueiredo and Perez is now the main event of 255. I think Burns Usman could be a pretty good coaching pair. Only problem is both of those guys, not very notable names.
Wait a minute.
Wouldn't be exactly the highest ratings you could bring in. But I think putting them out there will only make them known more to the audience. Put it on ESPN Plus, boom, Ultimate Fighter. You have Usman in front of TVs all the time. This is your welterweight champion. You keep talking about how great he is. You keep talking about how great Gilbert Burns is. And then when they meet for the championship, they are a little bit more well known to the audience. Ultimate Fighter is always fun. I don't think it necessarily matters that much anymore because you have shows like Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series that are able to bring in really quality fighters, and it's just boom, live fights right there. Like, you love to see it. With that said, I will be watching when it comes out. Speaking of Israel Adesanya had some little Twitter beef going on with Jon Jones, as he has for the past, year or so. He didn't force Jones, but he kind of egged Jones on to the point that Jon Jones admitted to the story of him hiding under the cage at Greg Jackson's gym. The story is he hid because he was, he was going to test positive for like steroids or something. Jones went on Twitter and said, I was only high off marijuana at the time, and that's why I hid. Point of the story is Jon Jones admitted to that. He admitted to hiding from USADA, to hiding from the people who were trying to drug test him.
Winners don't use drugs.
Does that not make him look a little sus, It does. Plus, it's just funny that Izzy was able to get that out of Jon, Hilarious. Moving on. Not related to anything that I just said, but Neil Magny. Big ups to my man Neil Magny coming off a win. He's getting Chimaev, more than likely. Reports are that they're working on this fight. Neil Magny and Khamzat Chimaev, both parties are seemingly down. I think this is a great fight for Neil Magny and for Chimaev. Get Neil Magny some respect. He wins this fight. He deserves respect, deserves to move up the rankings. And if Chimaev wins, it's a good win for him against a ranked opponent, and he should move up the rankings. He's not even ranked right now. And I don't think he should be. I mean, Gerald Meerschaert, good fighter, but he's not necessarily someone that you should be ranked after beating. So that's it for news and rumors. Let's go ahead and run through this fight card. Got some thoughts on it. On the prelim, Said Nurmagomedov defeated Mark Striegel via knockout, no relation to Khabib. Maxim Grishin defeated Antigulov via TKO in round number 2. Fares Ziam defeated Jamie Malarkey via unanimous decision. Might have been the wrong decision. I kind of scored this for Jamie Malarkey. Jun Young Park defeated John Phillips via unanimous decision, basically 30-25 around the board. Domination the entire fight. Park broke a record, the most ground strikes in UFC history, with 286, nearly 300.
He's already dead.
Just absolutely dominated John Phillips. We had Jillian Robertson in action defeating Poliana Botelho via unanimous decision. And the fight of the night, the featured prelim fight, Guram Kutateladze defeated Mateusz Gamrot via split decision. It was Gamrot's first loss, came into this fight at 17-0, now 17-1. Former KSW 2 division champion, Kutateladze is training partners with Chimaev. And you could definitely tell. He looked good out there. Both guys look good. Fight of the night, Guram did not think that he won, interestingly enough. Gamrot, I still feel like has a really good future here in the UFC. Kutateladze was an unknown fighter coming into this. He only got on the card because he's friends with Chimaev, and Chimaev said, look, like my boy can fight. Get him a fight. And Dana did. And there you go. Kutateladze, your winner in the feature prelim. Moving on to the main card, Jonathan Martinez defeated Thomas Almeida in the bantamweight division. Good look for Jonathan Martinez. He looked up to Almeida as a young fighter, looking up to him. Almeida's first fight in over 2 years. Was once a ranked bantamweight, looked good back in 2017, 2018. Martinez now has won 4 out of his last 5, and he didn't want to call anyone out after. Kind of a humble guy, a nice chap. He'll need to work on that. In the welterweight division, James Krause defeated Claudio Silva via unanimous decision. After the first round, Krause admitted to his corner that he tore up his knee. He definitely messed it up, and you definitely tell in the second and third round he was definitely hobbling on it, but he still won the first 2 rounds. And Silva kind of put it on him late into the fight, but it was a little bit too late. Interesting, because Silva before this fight was criticizing the UFC for favoring white fighters in terms of marketing and booking, saying like, oh, like a guy like Sage Northcutt and Paige Van Zandt can be terrible fighters, but they still get put in main events, main card. Meanwhile, I'm on a 5-fight winning streak and I'm not getting any love. Well, Silva's not on a 5-fight winning streak anymore, losing to James Krause here today. Afterwards, James Krause actually criticized the viral knockout artist from last week, Joaquin Buckley. He says that Buckley hit him up, tried to train with him, and he refused. And to actually quote Krause, he said, "Get effed."
He asked me if he could come train, and I told him to get fucked.
Buckley's actually already booked a fight. He's booked at UFC 255 against Jordan Wright. So joke's on James Krause. You will not be fighting Buckley anytime soon. We had Jimmy Crute defeating Modestas Bukauskas via knockout in first round. A pretty quick fight, honestly. Crute answered a leg kick with a big combo that included a big right hand. Performance of the night bonus went to Jimmy Crute. Simple as that. Co-main event, we already talked about it a little bit. Jessica Andrade defeating Caitlin Chookagian via TKO in the first round. Andrade in control the whole fight. Ended about 7 seconds before the horn for the first round. Huge body shot. Had Chookagian literally running away from her. She got finished shortly after. Performance of the night bonus for Jessica Andrade. Andrade wants Valentina for the title. Valentina is currently booked against Jennifer Maia at UFC 255 in a title fight. Interesting thought, since Cynthia Calvillo, she can't fight Lauren Murphy next week. Why not do her and Andrade? Title eliminator. Figure this mess out. Someone needs to fight, the winner of the Shevchenko and Maia fight. Why not do a title eliminator and make it easy peasy on everybody else? I think that'd be great. Moving on to our main events. As mentioned earlier on, Brian Ortega defeating Korean Zombie via unanimous decision. And a new look, Brian Ortega, shaved head, donated his locks to charity. That marketability maybe moving down a little bit. He looked really good with that long hair. Surely he can grow it back. I mean, I know I would not be able to. I'm only 25 years old, but I'm already going bald.
Coach James
it's not fun.
gave Brian Ortega a choice.
In this fight, Zombie never looked to click in a second or third gear. He always looked like he was kind of waiting. He wanted to counter, but he didn't counter. He just kind of let Ortega do his thing. And Ortega looked very much improved compared to the Holloway fight as far as the stand-up goes. Zombie got dropped twice during the course of this fight, one of them because of an amazing spinning back elbow. Zombie rushed in, boom, spinning back elbow. Ortega landed it flush, beautifully. Zombie got cut badly in round number 4 because of a situation where Ortega went for a takedown, had him up against the cage, and right as Zombie went up against the cage, landed a short right that cut him pretty badly. They stopped the fight for a minute because of it. Turned out he was okay. Zombie started to turn it around in round 5, but it was a little bit too late. He was already down 4 rounds and he lost the 5th round anyways. Ortega called out his haters after the fight, said, if you're not with me now, kind of F you essentially. And now he gets to fight for the featherweight title. He will fight Alexander Volkanovski in the near future for the featherweight title, and that is going to be a very interesting fight considering the size advantage that he's going to have over him, and the grappling advantage too. We didn't really see Volkanovski grapple all that much in his 2 fights against Max Holloway. We saw him in the stand-up, and with this improved Brian Ortega in the stand-up, size advantage, grappling advantage, he could be a very big problem for the featherweight champion. That was your main card for this past weekend. Let's look ahead to next week. UFC 254, Khabib versus Gaethje. I cannot wait for this fight. Big Khabib fan, big Gaethje fan. If I had to put money on it, this is what I think for the 2 main fights for next week. Jared Cannonier versus Robert Whittaker in the middleweight division. Got the number 1 taking on the number 3. Jared Cannonier fighting out of the MMA lab here in Glendale, Arizona. I have trained there on a couple of occasions. Robert Whittaker, of course, fighting out of Australia, former middleweight champion. I'm going to take Jared Cannonier in this one. If it ends within the first 3 rounds, Jared Cannonier is going to win. I'm going to say TKO round 2. If it goes to a decision, I feel like Robert Whittaker will win. I really like Jared Cannonier. He has massive power. He had it at heavyweight. He had it at light heavyweight. He brought it back down to middleweight. He dispatched David Branch on short notice when no one really knew who he was. He defeated Anderson Silva due to unforeseen circumstances, but he defeated him, and it looked like he was going to beat him anyways. And then he destroyed Jack Hermanson, and you've seen how impressive Jack Hermanson has been. I feel like this is Jared Cannonier's fight. I want to see him win.
I'm gonna smash your boy, guys.
Khabib versus Gaethje. If this goes to a decision, Khabib's gonna win. If this gets to the ground, Khabib's gonna win. My pick is Khabib via submission round 4. Gaethje needs to use those leg kicks and keep his distance. He cannot get up against the cage. He needs to make sure he controls the octagon. Otherwise, Khabib will win. If he lets Khabib take him down, move him over to the cage, and do what he does best, father plan, it's going to be a long night for Justin Gaethje. With that said, Khabib needs to do what I just said and use the father plan. This is going to be his first fight without his father. And because of that, it could be pretty hard on him. I'm not sure how it's going to affect him, but we'll see. we'll see. That's next week. And I'll be back next week as well. I'm Adrian Pelayo. I thank you for watching this edition of MMA Monday. Love coming at you guys at the beginning of the week. Can't wait to do it again next week as we take on Khabib versus Gaethje. Follow me on Twitter at azpelayo21. Instagram is theadrianpelayo21. Follow my YouTube channel, azpelayo21. If you want to watch me play some video games, talk more about MMA, you can catch the podcast on YouTube as well. I'm Adrian Pelayo. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next Monday.